Hello. Today we'll have Hrag, Austin, Michael, and me, Ochir, on this podcast. We will discuss prison rehabilitation in relation to the never-ending checklist topic.
Can truly be damaging on an individual, worse than anything we can imagine. They stay through the toughest moments and, if untreated, may lead to violence. Once convicted, they should most likely be taken to a mental health hospital. This should hopefully help them lessen their chances of recidivism or the act of reoffending after offending. This generally works out, and they are generally much happier than they would have been with those mental issues. At least, that's what we could hope. In the U.S., incarceration rates have only increased over time, while rehabilitation rates have only decreased over time. And so that one mental health patient who was supposed to go to a mental health hospital has now been convicted for goddamn 11 months. And you can imagine what that's going to do to his brain. It's not going to be good. While the U.S. has only increased its incarceration rates while lowering its rehabilitation rates, in general Western Europe, incarceration rates have stayed almost flat while rehabilitation has still increased. How could this be the case? Now, I think we should bring up this problem because, well, the U.S. has not really been embracing what's supposed to be. Incarceration rates in the U.S., as I've said before, have only been increasing, and that's kind of an issue. And that's not only the thing. The kind of harshness of these incarceration rates is getting more and longer. For instance, in Norway, if you were to just rob a place, say that little Jimmy was not feeling good today, he decides to rob his friend's house, it'll be around 3 months, and if it's a reoccurring, then it'll just be a year. Pretty good, and it allows just for the person to not be mentally damaged. Meanwhile, in the U.S., if little Jimmy decides to rob his friend's house, that'll be a casual 105 months. A little bit under 9 years. And if little Jimmy's doing that for the first time, he's going to get his first taste of prison with 3 to 7 years. So you can guess that little Jimmy's not going to do that again, and that's kind of the one benefit of incarceration. They're probably not going to do it again after such a horrible experience, but for some people, that is not going to help. For a mental health patient, for a drug abuser, that's not going to change much, and that's kind of an issue with the fact that the U.S. is not embracing rehabilitation. Meanwhile, in places like Europe, which are generally much more social than the U.S. and much less in mental health issues, it's not as prevalent because there's more rehabilitation, which is one of the things that just keeps mental health just generally high there.
Rehabilitation efforts would be. The rehabilitation efforts we already have in place are extremely effective and can even be expanded upon. The U.S. largely stopped using rehabilitation systems in the 1970s, and since 1970, the prison population has grown by around 8 times. This correlation heavily supports the research that already shows that rehabilitation is extremely important to reduce reincarceration rates. In addition, multiple prestigious colleges, including Stanford, have produced research that shows that rehabilitation systems heavily decrease a person's chance of reincarceration. The Bureau of Justice Statistics also says that being educated either in prison or after the prison sentence makes you almost 60% less likely to be reincarcerated. Therefore, we see that reincarceration systems are already in place that are effective, and that education systems also help criminals.
I was expecting. After I did the research, it seems as though just like rehabilitative incarceration will always be better than normal incarceration. It's just generally more humane, and also the U.S. incarceration system is crap, which, yeah, it's basically what I was expecting too.
For me, when I looked at the research, I noticed how like it kind of connected to how we did the My Incarcerated Family podcast, which gave more of a personal look into a family that had a lot of members who were formerly incarcerated, which gave us a good look into like the causes and what can be done about the incarceration systems in the US and about recidivism. Rehabilitation does allow criminals, especially like the ones who don't offend as to serious crimes, to reintegrate into society, which is always helpful. Even though there's a question that can be posed that might be on many's minds. What is the limit of who gets rehabilitated? For example, what if someone does a really horrible crime like murder with full intention, not just manslaughter? How do we react to this, and how do we set up the rehabilitation system for these people?
The results, well, not surprising, are that much more telling. However, I imagine that more serious criminals who commit atrocities such as murder and a lot of other stuff provide a challenge to those who actually believe in rehabilitation and believe it would be better for society. On the other hand, however, there is the chance that we rehabilitate those who have not only committed minor crimes that really have a chance to succeed in our society if they're just given a second chance, but there's also people who have created more serious crimes who some might argue could also be rehabilitated. It's an ongoing debate, and where we draw the line for rehabilitation, if we do, is something that we can discuss further on.
The effectiveness of rehabilitation obviously varies from person to person, depending on how accepting they are to change. Is there a way to make the population as a whole more susceptible to the effects of rehabilitation? That would greatly help, as it makes it easier to show research that rehabilitation works. This in turn would make rehabilitation systems easier to implement and make beneficial laws easier to pass. Also, if we jail someone for years and years as a crime, and most cells are also solitary confinement, make rehabilitation systems easier to implement and make beneficial laws easier to pass. Also, if we jail someone for years and years as a crime, most cells are also solitary confinement. There are two things that would stop them from committing crimes again: the threat of punishment and their own morals. Research shows that rehabilitation helps more than stricter punishment does.
In response to the topic, we can have a big question that could be posed by many people. What is, if there is, a limit for who gets rehabilitated? This is a difficult question to answer definitively, but we can make some distinctions.
And how we go about making these distinctions is also really important. Of course, we could simply set a line in the sand on what we count as too extreme to be rehabilitated. But that is the wrong way to go about these decisions. We got to remember that different people react to stimuli and rehabilitation very differently. People have different upbringings. People get into crime for different reasons. So to simply group people by crime extremity is not the right way to go about this. We need to create a system which is more tailored to individual people. And one of the ways we go about doing this is, of course, having professional psychiatrists. But we also need to see what works best in our society, even though is as diverse as it is.
And we could also make the distinction about, like, again, as Michael said, tailored to each person. Do they want rehabilitation? Are they really mentally prepared for that? How about the crime? Of course, we can't really, completely create a stark difference for each crime, as people are different. But still, there can definitely be distinctions made that people can agree on. Another big question we posed is, should we some people really want some people punished. That's like a punishment, right? Like being locked up. So do some people really want rehabilitation?
This is a good and a very interesting point to bring up. Punishment, and more accurately, a deterrent from crime. Is that what prison's role is supposed to be? We do not believe so. We believe that prison's role should be twofold. One, to keep the public safe, and two, to rehabilitate criminals back into public life. Now, this, again, can be debated, and there is no concrete answer yet. However, it is through this lens that we believe we can make the most efficient and a prison system that would help minimize crime for generations.
We're in the 21st century, and unlike past millennia and centuries, what we consider as punishment, like as for an eye, is long gone. Our society has new values that are more fair towards people. However, we can still debate the morality. For example, what if there is a murderer with full intent? Would you really want to rehabilitate them? That's not going to be a definitive answer that could be answered here. However, it could be a debated point. But still, what cannot be debated is the fact that rehabilitation really does work for many people in prison. And we must remember that people are different, and it's not just one mold for everybody.
We would like to thank the sources we found online, as it was instrumental in the opinion we would grow to develop and the discussion seen on our podcast. If you wish for more detail than the depth of this podcast, make sure to check them out. Our sources would include Stanford, the Criminology and Criminal Justice.org, Department of Justice Archive, Policy Research Associates, and much more. Thank you for everything, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day.